It's easy to process time-lapse or stop-motion videos using Adobe Bridge or Lightroom and Photoshop CS6. Let's begin with capturing the number of images you'll need for the sequence. I recommend shooting in RAW for the greatest flexibility in image processing, as there will be significant changes in lighting conditions as you shoot. Put the camera on a tripod. It's critical that it doesn't move while you're shooting so the images align perfectly. Next, determine how long you'd like the action you will record to appear on screen. In time-lapse, you can condense many hours into just a few seconds, likewise with stop motion. But how can you figure out how many frames to shoot? Here's an approach. Decide on a frame rate for playback. You can change this to a faster or slower rate when you process it, but this way you ensure you have at least the minimum number of frames for the rate you have in mind. Typical video playback rates are 24 frames per second for a cinematic look, or 30 frames per second for a more video look. In any case, you'll need to do a little math here. Let's say the scene plays out in real time over 1 hour. An hour is 60 minutes times 60 seconds for each minute, so you have 3,600 seconds in an hour. We'd like that event to be condensed to 30 seconds. 30 seconds at 24 frames per second equals 720 frames. Divide 3,600 by 720 and you get 5. That means you need to shoot a picture every 5 seconds for the total hour of the event to play back in 30 seconds at 24 frames per second. If you hate math, you can download an iPhone app called TL Calculator, which I use to check my math. Enter either the clip length desired or the event length, and it will calculate frame intervals for you, as shown here. Rather than having to stand next to the camera for an hour shooting frames every 5 seconds, you can use an intervalometer. It's a device you could program to release the shutter at regular intervals and decide how many frames you'd like as well. Alternatively, some newer DSLR models have this feature built in, or you can download the free Magic Lantern app if you have certain Canon camera models, which will add this feature. If you're shooting stop motion, you just need to decide how long you want your video to be. Move the subject, shoot a frame, move some more, etc. You will have to experiment to get the quality of movement you desire. Some things happen quickly, and most things build up to speed rather than explode like a rocket. So you have to factor that in into how many frames you shoot for each movement. You should shoot all images at the same f-stop or aperture and change shutter speed according to lighting conditions. Changing aperture could cause a focus shift. Shoot at a low ISO for top quality and reduced noise. Once all the images are shot, download them to your computer in one folder and launch Bridge or Lightroom. Select all the images you want to use and process them as JPEGs, no larger than 1280 pixels in the horizontal dimension at 72 pixels per inch. Any larger and your computer may not play the movies back smoothly. You may have to make some adjustments for the changing light and exposure, which reduces flicker. Delete any unusable frames. Batch rename files in sequence. This is a key step for importing and exporting as a movie in Photoshop. Once this is completed, launch Photoshop and go to File, Open. Navigate to the first image in the folder and click on it. The image sequence option should be checked. Once you select Open, a dialog box appears with a pull-down menu for frame rate. Here's where you can experiment with the effect of different rates. Start with 24 frames per second. It will create a movie file instantly. Use the timeline panel to play back the video. The first time you play it, it may skip frames, but Photoshop caches the file once played through and will likely play back much smoother the second time. The green line at the top of the timeline indicates how many seconds of video are in the cache. The longer this green line, the more frames are cached, the smoother the playback. You can trim your video in the timeline, and you could also add a soundtrack. If you want to try other frame rates, you can navigate back to the folder and open again as an image sequence. Change the frame rate to 12 frames per second for slower motion, or 60 frames per second for faster. Once you're done, you're ready to export your movie. Choose File, Export, Render Video. There are a number of preset options. Here, I've chosen a preset for YouTube 720p. I'll choose present frame rate. Play back your video once it's processed and upload it to share with your friends.